everyone, and welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be working on a beginner embroidery tutorial. So go ahead and grab some embroidery floss and a needle. Any color floss will do. You're going to need a hoop set up with some fabric, and I'll show you some basic stitches. So start by tying a simple double knot at one end of your embroidery floss. Take the opposite end and thread it through the eye of your needle. The double knot is going to keep your thread from slipping all the way through the fabric on your hoop. Now you're ready to stitch. We're going to start off with a simple running stitch. Notice here that I've drawn a faint line on the center of my fabric in the middle of my embroidery hoop. This is to keep my line straight. Begin by inserting the needle at the base of your line and pull up your thread. Make sure the knot meets the back of the fabric. Next, determine the length that you want your stitch to be and insert the needle. Once the needle's in the fabric, pull your thread all the way through until it's tight. Once you have that first stitch secured, measure up about a stitch length from the previous stitch and insert your needle up from the back through the front. Pull the stitch tight. Again, repeating that same step. Use about the same distance as that first stitch to mark a second stitch, going from the top through the bottom, and pull tight. So you repeat these exact same steps to complete the running stitch, going from the bottom up to the top, and then down from the top through the bottom, trying to keep your stitches consistent in length. So depending on what design or pattern you're working on, I like to keep the gaps in between each one of my stitches about the same length as each stitch. This gives a consistent and even look to the running stitch. You can easily customize the length of your running stitch by making your stitch longer or shorter and doing the same thing with the breaks in between each stitch. This is going to help you customize your patterns based on what your needs are. You can likewise make the stitch longer and have the gaps shorter, or have the gaps longer and the stitch shorter. It really just depends on what your project calls for. But this is the basics of creating a running stitch. Now that we've completed our last stitch, let's go ahead and secure our work. Start by flipping your work over to the wrong side and insert your needle through the last stitch you created. Leaving a small loop of thread, reinsert that needle through that loop and pull until it's snug. Pull up in the direction of your work. A small knot has formed on the back, securing your work. Now take a small pair of scissors, go ahead and snip it so it's about 1/4 to 1/2 inch long, and now your work is secure. Let's move on to the back stitch. Insert your needle from the bottom through the top and pull until it's snug. Then, depending on the length of your stitch, insert the needle and pull the thread tight. Now, the length of that stitch, you're going to go up on your stitch line, reinsert the needle from the bottom to the top, pull your thread all the way through. Now, taking the tip of your needle, you're going to reinsert it back into the ending hole of your first stitch and pull your thread tight. Notice you're moving in a backwards motion. This is why they call it the back stitch. Again, inserting from the bottom up and the top down into the top of the previous stitch. Make sure to pull your thread tight in between each and every stitch. This is going to keep your work tidy. So again, insert your needle up, 1 stitch length away, pull your thread tight, and insert the needle into the top of the previous stitch and pull your thread down, always working in a backwards motion. Just like any of the stitches you do in embroidery, it's really easy to customize the length of your stitch. You can make it as long or as short as you need. This is going to be based on the project that you're doing or the look that you're trying to create with your pattern. So let's go ahead and complete this row of back stitches. Again, inserting from the bottom up and down into the top of the previous stitch you created. Insert the needle from the bottom up again, about a stitch length away from the previous stitch, pull your thread tight, and insert the needle back down through the top of the previous stitch. So now we've finished our row of back stitches. Let's go ahead and secure our work. Just as we did previously, flip your work over to the wrong side and insert your needle through the previous stitch. Make a loop, take your needle and reinsert it through that loop, and pull snug going in the direction of your work. Once it's secure, go ahead and take a pair of scissors and give it a snip. Let's go ahead and move on to the chain stitch. Starting from the wrong side of your work with your needle, go ahead and pull up your thread until the knot meets the back of your fabric. Now taking the tip of the needle, you're going to insert it right next to, but not into, the stitch where you just came up, leaving a little loop of fabric on the front of your work. Now from the back side of your fabric, you're going to go ahead and decide the length that you want your stitch. Insert your needle there, going up through the center of the loop on the front of your work until your thread is secure. Go ahead and pull it tight and repeat the steps. Insert the needle back through the loop on the front of your fabric, close to but not into the previous stitch, leaving a loop on the front. Again, leaving that small loop of thread on the front of your work. Insert the needle from the back to the front, going up through that loop, and pull tight. Once you've got all the thread pulled to the front, you're going to reinsert your needle again through the loop and next to the exit of the previous thread, not going through the same hole. And you'll just keep repeating these steps until all your chains have formed. So again, pulling your thread all the way through, leaving a loop on the front. Take the tip of your needle and insert it up through that loop and pull your thread tight. Take the tip of your needle, reinsert it in through that loop and very close to that previous thread, pulling it down through the bottom, creating that loop on the front of your work. Again, trying to keep the length of all your stitches consistent. Reinsert that needle up through the loop on the top of your work and pull until it's secure. Take the tip of your needle, again reinserting it through that loop and pull through. So this is the basic steps to creating a chain stitch. Relatively easy, but it is one of the more time-consuming stitches to get consistent length and consistent loops. But like everything, especially with embroidery, practice makes progress. So just keep practicing. Now let's go ahead and get this line of chain stitches completed. So if at any point during this video you need to go back and reference a particular stitch and how to complete it, check the description box and I will have a timestamp for each particular stitch and what time it starts down there. This will make it easy for you to go back to a particular stitch and watch that as many times as you need to. So now let me show you how to secure your chain stitches. Once you've finished that last loop, you're going to go ahead and insert your needle right at the tip of that last loop, pulling it through to the back. This is going to secure the loop on the front of your work. Now turn your work over to the wrong side, and as you've done with all the previous stitches, insert your needle through that last stitch and make a loop. Pull the thread tight in the direction of your work and clip your threads when you're done. Now let's move on to our final stitch, which is the satin stitch. So here I've drawn a square on the front of my work. I'm going to start in that lower left corner, working from the wrong side to the front. Insert your needle in the corner, pull up your thread until the knot is secure on the back. Then take the tip of your needle and you're going to insert it into the next point where you want your thread to end. So for me, it's going to be that top left corner. Pull your thread through, going back down to the bottom of your work where you started, and over slightly from that first entrance point. Pull your thread up, then take the tip of the needle, line it up to that line up above where you had your first exit point and pull the thread down. Satin stitches are great filler stitches. Again, from the bottom, insert your needle up through the back side next to the previous stitch and down through the top. And you're just going to repeat this step to complete the satin stitch. Now I'm going to show you an alternative method for the satin stitch that's not going to use quite as much thread. So instead of inserting your needle down at the bottom and moving to the top, you're going to just move over slightly from the last thread. Pull your thread all the way through, and now you're going to go down to the bottom, going from the top to the wrong side of your work. Once you've got the thread pulled tight, you're going to insert the needle from the wrong side to the right side on that same line of stitching. Pull your thread all the way through until it's tight, and now move up to the top and insert your thread from the top to the wrong side, again pulling tight. Once that thread is tight, moving up from the wrong side of the fabric right next to that previous thread, pull up your thread and now down to the bottom. And you'll just continue with this pattern until all of your satin stitches are complete. Both methods work exactly the same and get the same results. One is just going to use more embroidery floss than the other. But do whatever you're the most comfortable with or whatever makes the most sense for you and your pattern. So now let's take a look at the back of this satin stitch so you can actually see the difference of how much floss you would use doing one method or the other. So do whatever works best for you and whatever you're comfortable with. Now let's go ahead and secure off our satin stitch on the back side of our work. Just like all the other stitches, you're going to pull up through the previous stitch or the last stitch that you made, making a loop. Pull your needle through that loop and secure your knot. and you'll clip your thread, leaving again either a 1/4 or a 1/2 inch tail. So that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I would love it if you would stick around and hit that subscribe button. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I will see you next time. Bye!